Okay, this is the manual for A Victory Lost, Crisis in Ukraine, 1942 to 1943. Table of contents. I've got the introduction, game components, preparation for play, sequence of play, stacking, zone of control, command, movement, combat, supply, reinforcements, headquarters special rules, Stalingrad pocket, victory conditions, and play balance. You can find extra material for A Victory Lost, including design notes, historical notes, and advice on how to easily get into the game at multimanpublishing.com. Introduction. A Victory Lost is a two-player game that recreates the intense mobile fighting between Axis and Soviet forces in the southwestern USSR, from the completion of the Stalingrad encirclement in December 1942 to General Field Marshal von Manstein's famous backhand blow in March 1943. The Soviet player aims to trap and eliminate the Axis forces in full retreat from the Caucasus, while the Axis player must successfully withdraw and attempt to restore the front line by launching a desperate counterattack. The slightest mistake might turn victory into defeat. The outcome depends on your decisions. Scale. A hex represents approximately 13 kilometers of terrain from side to side. Each turn represents about a 10-day period. Combat units are mostly divisions, except the Soviet mechanized tank and cavalry units, which are corps. Okay. Components. One 24-inch by 34-inch map sheet, 280 counters, one rulebook, one 6-sided die. Calculation conventions. When halving or quartering, always round down resulting fractions. Examples. 1/2 of 5 is 2.5 and is rounded down to 2. 1/4 of 3 is 0.75, rounded down to 0. When the combat strengths of stacked units must be halved or quartered, add them up before halving or quartering. Game components. You will need an opaque container to play this game. I think that's for the chit draw. Map. The map represents the area of the Soviet Union over which the historical campaign was fought. A grid of hexagons, hereafter called hexes, is superimposed upon it to facilitate positioning and movement of the playing pieces. Colored symbols printed on the map show where various Axis and Soviet units must be set up at game start. Several charts, tables, tracks, and boxes are printed around the map. The terrain effects chart provides a map key and shows the effects of the different terrain features on movement and combat. The combat results table is used to resolve combats. The turn track is used to record the turn currently in progress. The command chit pools are used to hold the command chits that are not in the cup. The German 1st Panzer Army and Soviet 28th Army reinforcement boxes are used to hold the headquarters and combat units of the 1st Panzer Army and 28th Army on the turns they enter play as reinforcements. Supply source hexes. A hex with a red supply symbol is a supply source for Soviet units. A black supply source symbol indicates a supply source for Axis units. Bridges. A river hex side crossed by a road or railroad is a bridged river hex side. Conversely, a river hex side not crossed by a road or railroad is an unbridged river hex side. Combat units. Combat units represent the military forces that took part in the historical campaign. They are color-coded by nationality. So the Germans are this grayish blue color, Italians, Romanians, Hungarians, and Soviets. Some Axis nationalities have restrictions on stacking and activation. The numerical ratings and symbols printed on combat units can be read as follows. So mechanized and non-mechanized, how do you know which one is which? Is it the number of numbers? So you've got the unit ID at the top, unit type. So they're not using NATO symbols. Reinforcement information, is that the turn? Attack strength, defense strength, movement allowance. Combat strength, movement allowance. Okay. How do you tell mechanized versus non-mechanized? Unit types, mechanized units. Motorized infantry, armor. Non-mechanized, okay, so mechanized units have 3 numbers at the bottom. Non-mechanized units, infantry, mounted infantry, cavalry. Cavalry is non-mechanized. Is that like actual cavalry, like horses? Okay. Unit type and setup information. The symbol indicates the type of the unit. Its color is only intended to help to locate the area of the map where the unit is set up at game start. Black symbols denote units that will enter play during the game as reinforcements. Like this. White symbols denote units of the German 1st Panzer and Soviet 28th armies. White symbols. Like this. I don't know what they mean by white symbol. Like this symbol? Is this symbol white or black or both? It's confusing. All right. Unit ID. This indicates the number or name of the unit. Important note. Unit ID and symbol color have no effect on how and when combat units are activated, move, or fight. Reinforcement information. The number indicates the turn on which the unit enters play as a reinforcement. Okay, so that's this number on the right here. Combat strengths. These ratings are used to resolve combats. Mechanized units have separate attack and defense strengths. Non-mechanized units have only a combat strength, used both as attack strength and defense strength. Okay. Movement allowance. This rating determines how far the unit can move and is expressed as a number of movement points. Alternate counters. Okay, symbol combat unit. What does that mean? Silhouette combat unit. Oh, okay, I see. The counter mix includes alternate counters for all the mechanized combat units in the game. These units' counters have their unit type symbols replaced by the silhouettes of the vehicles they primarily used. Setup information is depicted by the colored background band. The silhouette counters may be used in place of the symbol counters if you wish. It's kind of bizarre that they would give you that kind of option. All right. Note, the red stripe on the silhouette units of the Soviet 2nd Guard Army is hard to notice. You can tell these units apart from reinforcement units by the fact that they do not have a reinforcement number. Okay. Oh, I see, because the counter itself is red. So where this would be a red band, he's saying that this red band would be difficult to notice here because it would look like the background of the red unit. Got it. Okay, full strength side, reduced strength side. So it looks like the difference is the top color. Most units have a full strength side, front, and a reduced strength side, back, with decreased combat strength. Some only have a full strength side. Their back is blank. Combat losses flip a combat unit to its reduced strength side, or eliminate it if it has no reduced strength side. Combat units are set up or enter the game on their full strength side. Combat unit ID abbreviations. Soviets. C is cavalry, M is mechanized, G is guards, TK is tank. Germans. DR is Das Reich, LW is Luftwaffe, MT is mountain, TOT is Totenkopf, LAH is Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, GD is Großdeutschland, MOT is motorized, PZ is Panzer, WIK is Viking. Okay. Italians. COS is Cosseria, JUL is Julia, SFC is Sforzesca, TRD is Tridentina, PADA is Divisione Celere Principe Amedio Duca d'Aosta. Don't know what that means. CUN is Cuninsi, RAV is Ravenna, TOR is Torino. So this is maybe where the units came from. I'm not sure. Romanians, MOT is motorized. Hungarians, TK is tank. Okay. Headquarters. Headquarters, HQs, represent the high echelon formations, mainly armies, that historically took part in the campaign. They are color-coded like the combat units. HQs are not combat units. HQ type, reinforcement information, setup information, command range, movement allowance, and the headquarters ID. Okay. Headquarters types. Regular headquarters and an armor headquarters. So I guess this little icon here, the armor icon, distinguishes them. The numerical ratings and symbols printed on headquarters can be read as on combat units, except the following. HQ type. This is only for historical information. Armor HQs operate exactly as other HQs. Command range. That was this first number. This rating is used to determine which combat units the HQ can activate. Okay, what's the background mean, if anything? Setup information. This is shown by the colored band on the bottom of the counter, coded as for combat units. Okay, right, this colored band here. Some special rules apply to headquarters. See Section 12 for more details. HQ ID abbreviations. Soviets. A is Army, GDA is Guards Army, Popov is Mobile Group Popov, SHA is Shock Army, TKA is Tank Army. Axis. FPICO is Army Detachment Freter Pico. H2A is Hungarian 2nd Army, Panzer Army, Italian 8th Army, Army Detachment Kempf, Army Detachment Holit, Romanian 3rd Army. Okay. Comanchets. Comanchets are used to activate specific headquarters, which in turn allow combat units to move and attack. Each turn, a number of Axis and Soviet Comanchets are placed in the same cup, from which they are randomly drawn one by one. Okay. There is one corresponding command chit for each HQ in the game, plus 3 special command chits, 2 Axis Manstein chits, and 1 Soviet Stavka chit. Okay. I remember Greg at the Players' Day talking about this being useful when attacking. Markers. The following markers are used in this game: turn track marker, control markers, out of command markers, out of supply markers, isolated markers. Okay. Turn marker. It is placed on the turn track to record the turn currently in progress. Control markers. They are used to show which side controls each victory city for victory purposes. Out of command markers. These can be used when a player feels the need to mark units that are out of command range. This is often done when the Soviet player draws the Stavka command chit. Out of supply and isolated markers. These are placed out of supply side up on units that are out of supply. Their reverse side, isolated, is used to show units that are isolated. Gray and red versions of these markers are provided to be used on Axis and Soviet units respectively. Okay. Preparation for play. The players select their side, Axis or Soviet. The players choose whether they will use the symbol or silhouette mechanized units and set up their forces according to the information printed on the map. R, H, and IT prefixes in front of some unit IDs designate Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian units respectively. Place the turn marker on the 1 space of the turn track and a control marker Axis side up on each victory city. Note that at game start, the Axis player has 25 victory points, while the Soviet player has 0. Soviet command chits. The Soviet player takes the Stavka command chit and secretly selects 5 of the remaining Soviet command chits. He can select command chits of HQs scheduled to enter play later as reinforcements if he wants. For the moment, he places these 6 chits face down in his inactive command chit pool. These command chits will be the only ones available to the Soviet player for the duration of the game. For the duration of the game. The remaining Soviet command chits are put away in the box and are never used throughout the game. The Axis player cannot check which chits these are. What? Okay, this seems a little bit weird to me, but let's see what else they say. Note, actually, this choice is not as agonizing as it seems. All Soviet HQs on the map are activated when the Stavka command chit is drawn. So even HQs whose command chits were not selected at game start will be able to activate combat units during play. Think of the 5 specific command chits you select as your spearhead formations that will get activated more than the others. Okay, got it. Players who are just learning the game might be well served to make their chit selections after historical activations. Stalin chose the 1st Guards Army, the 2nd Guards Army, the 3rd Guards Army, the 5th Tank Army, and a reinforcement HQ, Group Popov, as his 5 choices. What does that mean, as his 5 choices? I guess the ones that he would attack with? Start with those command chits if you are at all uncomfortable, and you can start experimenting after you know the game better. Okay, got it. Axis command chits. The Axis player places the following 5 command chits in the Axis inactive command chit pool, face down. 4th Panzer Army, Holit, Italian 8th Army, Hungarian 2nd Army, Romanian 3rd Army. Additional chits will be available later as they enter play as reinforcements. Supply. At game start, all units on the map are in supply. Sequence of play. The game proceeds by following the phases outlined below. More details appear in later rules sections and in the expanded sequence of play at the back of this booklet. This sequence of phases constitutes a turn and must be repeated until either turn 9 is over or one player has at least 30 victory points more than his opponent, which results in the end of the game. Okay. Command phase. Command chit selection phase. Both players choose a given number of their available command chits and place them into the same cup. Command execution phase. Command segment. A command chit is drawn randomly from the cup. The player to whom this chit belongs becomes the active player. He activates the HQ corresponding to the chit and can then activate friendly combat units within this headquarters command range. Movement segment. The active player can move his activated units. Combat segment. The active player can attack enemy units using his activated units. If there are command chits left in the cup, return to step 1. If there are none, go to the supply phase. Turn 1 Special Combat Segment. On turn 1 only, the Soviet player can activate any one of his HQs, even one whose corresponding command chit is not in the cup, prior to the command segment. The combat units within the chosen headquarters command range perform a normal combat segment, that is, attack enemy units and advance after combat, but they do not get to perform a movement segment before that, as would be the case in a normal activation. No command chit whatsoever is drawn during this special combat segment. Once this segment is over, proceed with the regular sequence above. Okay. Supply phase. Both players determine the supply state of their units. Then, all headquarters with an out-of-supply marker must be relocated. End of turn phase. Reinforcement segment. Both players receive the reinforcement headquarters, combat units, and for the Axis player, Manstein command chits due for the current turn and place them on the map. Then, headquarters with no friendly combat units within their command range are removed from the game with their corresponding command chits. Okay. Sudden death victory segment. Check to see whether one of the players has achieved victory. Turn advance segment. Advance the turn marker to the next box on the turn track and return to the command phase. Okay. Stacking. 2 or more friendly units in the same hex constitute a stack. A maximum of 2 combat units, whether full or reduced strength, and 1 headquarters can occupy a hex. A headquarters cannot be stacked with another headquarters. Axis and Soviet units can never stack in the same hex. The only time when a unit can enter an enemy-occupied hex is when a lone headquarters is overrun. Axis stacking restrictions. German units can stack with units of any Axis nationality. Units of other Axis nationalities can only stack with units of their own nationality or with German units. Okay, so you can't stack, for example, Italian with Hungarian. Got it. Historical note. The Axis miners generally operated independently of each other on the Soviet front, only coordinating with the German armies for a host of reasons. Hungarians and Romanians had a hatred for each other that had existed and grown for centuries. When they were close to each other, they often forgot about the war against the Russians and attacked each other. This is why they were kept apart. As for the Italians, the Germans felt that they could not fight well to begin with, so to just let them learn more bad habits from the Hungarians and Romanians was just out of the question. Okay. The Germans even practiced something they called corset stiffening, placing some machine guns behind Italian units to ensure proper motivation. This practice was even more common among the Soviet army. The stacking limit is enforced at the moment reinforcement units are placed on the map, or at the instant a unit finishes its movement, retreat, or advance after combat. It is not enforced during these activities. So with that would suggest that you could move units through each other. Okay. Zone of control. The zone of control does not extend across the impassable hex sides. Okay. The zone of control does not extend into the water hex. I see. Oh, I see. The impassable hex sides are the water. I guess this is water. Every combat unit exerts a zone of control into the 6 hexes surrounding it. The only exceptions are that zones of control do not extend into water hexes or across impassable hex sides. Yes, that means they do extend across unbridged major rivers. So what is this, a lake? Headquarters exert no zone of control. This is different from Holland 44. In Holland 44 they do not, but that's also a lower level game with battalion-sized units. And here I think it's divisions, armies. They don't have formation sizes. Let's see. Combat units are mostly divisions, right? Okay. Okay, where was I? Zones of control affect supply, movement, retreat, and reinforcement placement. See the respective rules sections for more details. 2 or more zones of control overlapping in one hex have the same effect as a single zone of control. Command. Combat units must be activated by a headquarters to move and attack other units. This occurs as per the procedure below. Command chit selection. Available command chits. In the command chit selection phase, both players gather all their available command chits, that is, the chits in their respective inactive and played command chit pools. Command chit selection. The players then secretly select a given number of their available command chits and put them into the same cup. The Soviet player selects the Stavka chit and 3 other chits every turn. The Axis player selects the number of chits indicated after Axis COM on the turn track. This varies every turn between 3 and 6. So COM is command. The remaining command chits are placed face down in their inactive command chit pools and are not used this turn. A player may not check the command chits in the cup or in his opponent's inactive command chit pool. Command execution. Command chit draws. In the command execution phase, command chits are randomly drawn one by one from the cup. Which player draws does not matter. The owner of the drawn chit becomes the active player and activates the headquarters corresponding to this chit. The activated headquarters can in turn activate combat units, not headquarters, within its command range to move and fight. The player then places the drawn chit face up into his played command chit pool. Okay. Headquarters activation. A drawn command chit activates the headquarters with the same ID, with the following 2 exceptions. The Soviet Stavka chit activates all the Soviet headquarters on the map, including the 28th Army headquarters if it is in its reinforcement box. An Axis Manstein chit activates any one headquarters of the Axis player's choice. The Axis player may reject a Manstein chit that was just drawn and return it to the cup. But if the very next draw is a Manstein chit again, it cannot be rejected and must be played. Note, the Manstein chits allow the Axis player to time his attacks with great flexibility. Using these chits correctly is vital for successful play. Apart from these peculiarities, the Stavka and Manstein chits are normal command chits. In particular, the Manstein chits are not one-shot or free. Like all the other command chits, they are available to be selected each turn once in play, and count toward the number of chits allowed each turn to the Axis player. Headquarters and command execution. The headquarters corresponding to the drawn chit is activated. Combat unit activation. The activated headquarters can activate all friendly combat units. Headquarters cannot activate other headquarters within its command range, regardless of IDs and type symbol colors. A combat unit can be activated any number of times in one turn by different headquarters following different chit draws. Okay. Wow, okay. All friendly units within its command range. So this is something else that I remember, I think it was Grant. I remember Grant talking about this in one of his reviews of one of these games, where he said that as the Germans, you want to keep your headquarters next to each other because that way each of them can activate all of their own units and then all of the other units, the units of the other headquarters as well. So you basically get double activations for your units if you keep them close, if you keep the two headquarters close to each other. When the Stavka is drawn, all of the Soviet headquarters on the map are activated at the same time. Each eligible Soviet combat unit is activated only once, even if it is within command range of several activated headquarters. The activated combat units all move during a single movement segment. Then they all fight during a single combat segment. Command range. Command range is expressed as a number of hexes counted from the headquarters. A headquarters with a command range of 4 can thus activate friendly combat units up to 4 hexes away, 3 intervening hexes. Determine command range at the instant the headquarters is activated. A combat unit may be activated only if it is within command range of the active HQ at this moment. Activated combat units may later leave the headquarters command range as a result of movement, retreat, or advance after combat. Note: things can get confusing as activated headquarters and combat units move, especially when the Stavka is drawn, since all the headquarters are active at the same time. The active player may use out-of-command markers to designate combat units that are out of command range at the time of activation, or as soon as a risk of confusion arises. Command range limitations. A command range cannot extend across impassable hex sides or through water hexes. A command range crossing an unbridged major river hex side must stop in the hex across the river and cannot extend further. Supply status, enemy units, or enemy zones of control have no effect on command range. Okay. Axis activation restrictions. German headquarters can activate combat units of any Axis nationality. Italian, Romanian, and Hungarian headquarters can only activate combat units of their own nationality or German units. Okay, so we got a command example. So this is the command, this is the HQ. The motorized division is out of command range because of the unbridged major river hex side. So it has a command range of 4, that's the first number. 3, okay. Unbridged major river hex side. 1, 2, 3. This hex is confusing. The 11th division is within the command range. 1, 2, 3. Yep. The Hungarian 19th division is within the command range of the Romanian headquarters unit. This one. But it cannot be activated due to the Axis activation restrictions. Okay, right. One ally headquarters cannot activate a unit from another nation. The 16th Motorized Division is within the command range because enemy units and zones of control are ignored for purposes of command range. Okay, so this is an enemy Soviet unit. The 370th Division is out of command range. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, got it. Movement. In the movement segment, the active player can move his activated HQ and combat units. Movement procedure. Units are moved one at a time. A unit cannot start moving until the previous unit has completed its move. Movement points. In a movement segment, each activated unit receives a number of movement points, MPs, equal to its movement allowance. A unit may use all, some, or none of its movement points. Unused movement points are lost. They cannot be kept from one movement segment to another. To enter an adjacent hex, a unit must expend the movement point cost indicated by the terrain effects chart for the hex, and hex side if applicable. A unit cannot enter a hex if it has insufficient movement points remaining. River hex sides. River hex sides have the following effects on movement. To cross an unbridged minor river hex side, a unit must expend one movement point in addition to the normal movement point cost of the entered hex. To cross an unbridged major river hex side, a unit must start its move adjacent to the river. It moves across the river, but that must then stop and can go no further in that movement segment. Crossing a bridged river hex side negates the river movement costs above. Overruns. A moving combat unit can overrun a lone enemy headquarters by simply entering its hex. A unit may not move off-map into a water hex or across an impassable hex side. What is this? Movement example. So the 44th Guards Division cannot cross the major river as it does not start its movement adjacent to one of the river hex sides. What are the river? Oh, I guess these two bottom hex sides are the river hex sides. So it looks like these rivers are supposed to be across the hex side, but they're just kind of drawn. They're thick, I guess is the way to put it. In the Simonich games, they're much more clearly along the hex side. Okay, I got it. The 4th Guards Division can cross the major river hex side, as it does start its movement adjacent to it. It must stop moving once across. The 38th Guards Division can cross the major river using the bridge. Okay. The 3rd Tank Corps can use some or all of its movement points. The 35th Guards Division must expend one additional movement point to cross the minor river hex side. Got it. The numbers show cumulative movement point expenditure during movement. Got it. Okay. Zone of control effects on movement. Enemy zones of control affect movement in the following ways. Movement point expenditure. Entering or leaving a hex in an enemy zone of control costs a unit 2 extra movement points. These extra costs are cumulative. Major river hex sides. Crossing a major river hex side is not allowed if the hex is on each side of the river, the hex in which the unit starts and the one it wants to enter are in enemy zones of control. Even if the river hex side is a bridged hex side, and even if there are friendly units in the enemy zones of control. So does that mean on each side? Does that mean both sides or on either side? To me, this reads like it means both sides. Strategic movement. A unit using a road to enter an adjacent road hex expends only 1/2 of a movement point instead of the normal movement point cost of the terrain if the following conditions are met. The unit must start the movement segment in a hex containing a road and keep moving along the road during its entire move. The unit must neither start its move in an enemy zone of control nor enter an enemy zone of control during the movement segment. It can overrun enemy headquarters, though, as they have no zone of control. Railroads cannot be used for strategic movement. Okay. Zone of control effects on movement example. The 23rd Tank Corps cannot cross the unbridged Major River hex side because enemy zones of control exert into both the starting hex, so this is the unbridged Major River hex side. Enemy zones of control exert into both the starting hex and the hex across the river. So this is the enemy unit. It has a zone of control in the starting hex. This is the other enemy unit, which has this zone of control. Okay. It can enter the 3rd Panzer Division's zone of control, though, as shown. So it can pay 1 for clear terrain, plus 2 to exit this enemy zone of control, and then another 1 to enter clear terrain, and then another plus 2 to enter this unit's zone of control. Got it. With its movement allowance of 4, the 24th Guards Division cannot do the move shown, this hex, because this would cost 5 movement points. 1 for clear terrain, plus 2 for leaving a zone of control, and then plus 2 for entering a zone of control. The numbers show cumulative movement point expenditure during movement. Got it. What's this? Strategic movement example. Okay. Oh, okay, so the road movement is strategic movement. Okay, strategic movement example. The Romanian 5th Division can use strategic movement, but it must end its move in the hex shown because it cannot enter an enemy zone of control. So it can pay half a movement point to enter here, and then another half, another half, another half, just one other half, another half, and then it has to stop here. Got it. Understood. The Romanian 9th Division cannot use strategic movement because it starts its move in an enemy zone of control. Got it. Okay. Combat. In the combat segment, the active player can attack enemy combat units adjacent to his activated combat units. Empty hexes or headquarters alone in a hex cannot be attacked. Okay. The active player is termed the attacker in the combat segment, while the other player is termed the defender, regardless of the overall strategic situation. Combat principles. An activated unit can participate in only one attack during a single combat segment. Non-activated units cannot participate in attacks, even when adjacent to enemy units. Okay. I'll wait to read that. Combat is voluntary. Activated units are not forced to attack enemy units. So this is different from the way it works in the Russian campaign. A single unit can attack only one hex. It cannot attack 2 or more hexes. 2 units stacked in the same hex may attack 2 different hexes separately. A single hex can be attacked only once per combat segment. Units in 2 or more hexes adjacent to the same hex can attack it together. If 2 or more units want to attack the same hex, their attack strengths are added together and only one combat is resolved. If several enemy units are stacked in the attacked hex, the attacker must attack all of them. The defense strengths of the units are added together. A unit separated from an attacked hex by an impassable hex side cannot participate in the attack. Combat procedure. Combats are resolved one by one in the order of the attacker's choice, according to the following procedure. 1. Declare which hex is attacked by which units. 2. Determine the total attack and defense strength. Calculate the combat ratio and modify it if necessary. 3. Roll 1 die on the CRT and apply the combat result. As I'm reading through this, I'm thinking like this game seems like another step, a nice stepping stone towards the Simonich games. So you can maybe start someone with the Russian campaign and then have them play some of these victory lost games and then finally step up to the Simonich games. Combat ratio determination. Attack and defense strengths. To resolve a combat, first combine the attack strengths of the attacker's participating units. Then combine the defense strengths of the defender's participating units. Several factors can affect attack and defense strengths. Units attacking across river hex sides, bridged or unbridged, have their attack strengths. If a combat unit involves units that can attack across a river hex side and units that do not, only those attacking across the river hex side have their attack strengths. Okay. Okay, I get it. Out of supply units have their attack strengths. Isolated units have both their attack and defense strengths. Terrain effects are cumulative with supply effects. Okay, so that means you can get halved from the river and then halved again from being out of supply. When 2 combat units stacked in a hex must have or quarter their combat strengths, first add them up before halving or quartering and rounding down. Okay. Maybe look at the example. The German 27th Panzer Division, this one, is out of supply and is attacking across a minor river hex side. Its attack strength is quartered to 1.5 from 6, which is rounded down to 1. Wow, that's brutal. Okay. Okay, let's look at this combat ratio. Total attack strength divided by total defense strength gives the combat ratio. When calculating ratios, fractions are rounded down to either the nearest column on the CRT or, when above 10 to 1, the nearest whole ratio. Examples. What does that mean, the nearest whole ratio? Okay, I think that means you would round it to like 11 to 1, 12 to 1. Okay, examples. 15 to 5 gives a 3 to 1 combat ratio. 26 to 9 gives a 2 to 1 combat ratio because it's just shy of 27. 12 to 7 gives a 1.5 to 1 combat ratio. 18 to 13 gives a 1 to 1 combat ratio. 25 to 2 gives a 12 to 1 combat ratio. So this is the example they gave of the nearest whole ratio if it's above 10 to 1. Okay, I think this was an example of the combat. Yeah. So the stacked German units are out of supply. Their total attack strength is 3 plus 3 divided by 2. So that's 6 divided by 2 is equal to 3. Okay. Both German units are out of supply. Their respective attack strength is 3 divided by 2 is 1.5, rounded down to 1. If they attack the Soviet Fourth C, what is 4C? 4C Corps together, their attack strength will be 1 times 2 is 2. Oh, that's interesting. So the same units, if they're in different hexes, would have a different result. Okay, what does 4C stand for again? And what is the C? Combat abbreviations. Cavalry. Okay. Where are we? Okay. Okay. Terrain ratio shifts. When occupied by the defender's units, some terrain types provide favorable ratio shifts. See the terrain effects chart. One shift causes to use either the combat ratio. Don't know what this, I think this is a mistake. I think they're defining what a shift means here. They're saying one shift means using either the combat ratio immediately down on the CRT or, when above 10 to 1, the whole ratio immediately lower. Terrain effects are cumulative. Examples. A rough hex with a town provides 2 ratio shifts down in favor of the defender. Oh, that's interesting. I think this is different from the Simonich system. I think in Simonich, you take the highest terrain effect. I think. I could be wrong about that. I don't think this example would work the same way in the Simonich system. I think you would just take the town. Anyway, so a rough hex with a town provides 2 ratio shifts down in favor of the defender, and thus a 3 to 1 attack would be reduced to 1.5 to 1. The first shift to 2 to 1, and the second shift to 1.5 to 1. One ratio shift reduces a 12 to 1 attack to 11 to 1. Right, so that's the example of the whole ratio immediately lower. If the final combat ratio is less than 1 to 1, once terrain effects have been applied, the attack is not possible. If it is greater than 10 to 1, the combat is resolved on the 10 to 1 plus column of the CRT. If the total defense strength in a hex is reduced to 0 by rounding down, the combat is immediately resolved on the 10 to 1 plus column of the CRT, regardless of possible terrain ratio shifts. Combat result determination. Okay. Once the final combat ratio has been computed, the attacker rolls one die and reads the result on the corresponding row under the appropriate column of the CRT. All results are expressed in terms of step losses and/or the number of hexes to retreat. I want to see some evidence about whether this retreating is realistic. It seems a bit... I'm not sure if it's realistic or not. Blank is no effect. A. The result affects the attacker. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remove the indicated number of steps from any involved units. DR. All involved defender units must retreat 1 hex. DR2. All involved defender units must retreat 2 hexes. Examples. A1 indicates the attacker must remove 1 step from any of his involved units. DR indicates the defender must retreat all of his involved units 1 hex. 3DR2 indicates the defender must remove 3 steps from any of his involved units, then retreat all of them 2 hexes. Okay, so this is all very standard. Let's maybe look at this impossible combat ratio example. The German 17th Panzer Division here has its attack strength halved to 3 by the Minor River hex side, which you can't see because it's under the red unit. 3 to 4 gives a combat ratio less than 1 to 1, so it gets halved to 3.5, which is rounded down to 3. And his defense is 4, which is the middle number. Right, the attack is 7, the defense is 4, right. So he ends up with 3 attacking against his defense of 4, which is less than 1 to 1, so the attack is impossible. Got it. The Soviet 7th Tank Corps attacks the German 335th Division in Chuguev. 4 to 3, so his defense is 3 here, gives a 1 to 1 combat ratio. But the shift provided by the town reduces the combat ratio below 1 to 1. This attack is impossible. Interesting, okay. The German, so this you can't attack with just armor against infantry in a town. The German 23rd Panzer Division and LAH divisions. What's LAH? Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. I don't know what that means. The German 23rd Panzer and LAH divisions attack the Soviet 4th Cavalry Corps in Kharkov, here. The total attack strength of 13, this 8, plus this 9, it's okay, so it's this 8 is halved by this minor river that you can't really see because it's underneath the counter. So that gets halved to 4, plus the 3 of this unit is 13. That's the total attack strength of 13. The total attack strength of 13 against the total defense strength of 1, which you can't see because it's underneath this arrow, gives a 13 to 1 combat ratio. This is shifted down to 11 to 1 by the city terrain. This attack is resolved on the 10 to 1 plus column of the CRT. Okay, got it. Zero defense example. The Soviet units, the red ones, attack the German 8th Luftwaffe Division, right? That's what that stands for. Yes. In Rostov, with a total attack strength of 6. So this is 3. This is 1, but it's across the river. So that would get halved, I think. And this is 3. So I think this gets, yeah, so I think the total is 3 plus 3 is 6, plus a half is 6.5, which gets rounded down to 6. So that's where they're getting the total attack strength of 6. As the 8th Luftwaffe is isolated, its defense strength is halved to 0.5 and then rounded down to 0. This attack is automatically resolved on the 10 to 1 plus column of the CRT, and the shifts due to city terrain are not applied. Okay. Got it. Step losses. Remove 1 step by flipping a full strength unit to its reduced strength side, or eliminating a reduced strength unit or a unit with no reduced strength side. The owning player allocates step losses as he pleases among his units. Eliminated units are removed from the map. Example: if 2 full-strength units in the same hex suffer a 2-step loss, the owning player can eliminate 1 unit or flip both units to their reduced strength side. Got it. Retreat. Units affected by DR or DR2 results must retreat 1 or 2 hexes after combat. It's interesting that this game doesn't have attacker retreat results. Retreat is not normal movement. Retreating units do not expend movement points. Units in a stack that is forced to retreat can split up and retreat into different hexes. Retreat restrictions. A retreating unit always retreats in such a way as to enter the fewest hexes in enemy zones of control, and thus to suffer the fewest step losses. Should step losses be equal during various retreat paths, a retreating unit must satisfy as many as possible of the following conditions. 1. Each hex entered is closer to any one friendly supply source. 2. The stacking limit is not exceeded in the last hex of retreat. Oh, that's it. That's 2. Condition 1 takes precedence over 2 if both cannot be satisfied. Enemy zones of control. Every combat unit forced to retreat into an enemy zone of control, even if this zone of control contains friendly units, must lose 1 step. Wow, that's brutal. Okay. Stacking limit. If a unit exceeds the stacking limit in the last hex of a retreat, it must retreat 1 additional hex within the 9.5.2 restrictions. If it exceeds the stacking limit in this new hex, it must retreat another hex, etc. Axis stacking restrictions. An Axis unit ending its retreat in a hex containing other Axis units with which it cannot stack must retreat 1 additional hex within the 9.5.2 restrictions. If it exceeds the stacking limit in this new hex, it must retreat another hex, etc. Okay, well, that's just identical. It's just a repetition, as far as I can tell. Major river hex sides. Major river hex sides have the following effects on retreats. Retreating across an unbridged major river hex side is allowed only if the combat unit starts its retreat adjacent to the hex side. Retreating across a major river hex side is not allowed if the hexes on each side of the river, the hex in which the unit starts and the one it enters, are in enemy zones of control, even if the river hex side is a bridged hex side, and even if there are friendly units in the enemy zones of control. Okay. Overruns. A retreating combat unit can overrun a lone enemy headquarters by simply entering its hex. A combat unit eliminated because an enemy zone of control extends in its retreat hex does not overrun a headquarters that would be in this hex. Okay. Okay, see. That's quite an edge case. So I think what that's saying is if you had a defender that had to retreat and it was going to have to retreat into a hex that contained an enemy lone headquarters. I don't know how that would happen, but if it had that situation and that hex was in an enemy zone of control from some other unit, the retreating unit would not eliminate the headquarters before it itself got destroyed. That's what they're saying there, I think. That's quite an edge case. Units forced to retreat off-map across impassable hex sides or into prohibited or water hexes are eliminated. Okay, so that's like the Dunkirk situation. Let's read this. Let's look at these examples. Okay, retreat restrictions example. The German 304th Division suffered a DR result. Where is it? It's here. It must retreat into the hex shown, as Soviet zones of control exert into each of the 3 other adjacent hexes. Got it. So this hex, and this hex. Got it. Okay. Retreat stacking limit example. The Soviet 38th Guard and 91st Divisions suffered a DR2 combat result. Where are they? 38th Guard. Okay, so where did they start? Here. They first retreat in Hex 1, where the German 19th Panzer and 320th Divisions exert zones of control. Both the 13th Guard and 91st must lose 1 step each. The full-strength 38th Guard is flipped to its reduced side, and the already reduced 91st Division is eliminated. The 38th Guard must now retreat another hex to Hex 2, where no enemy unit exerts a zone of control, but it exceeds the stacking limit doing so. The division then retreats 1 additional hex to Hex 3. What are the stacking limits again? I forgot. Stacking, page 5. A maximum of 2 combat units. Okay. So why would this exceed the stacking limit? I only see one other. Oh, I see, because these two, okay, right, the 48th Guard and the 270th Division are the 2 existing units in the stack. Got it. The 38th Guard is the one that's retreating. Okay, the Soviet 13th Tank Corps suffered a DR combat result. It retreats 1 hex closer to a friendly supply source here. Okay, so these are the supply sources. Got it. Okay. Advance after combat. Oh, what's this? River retreat example. Let's look at this one. The Soviet 7th Tank Corps can retreat across the major river hex side. This one can retreat here because it started adjacent. The Soviet 25th Guard Division Guards Division cannot retreat across the major river hex side here. Cannot retreat here because both its start hex and the hexes across are in enemy zones of control. Okay. So it would have been able to cross if this unit was like over here because it started adjacent to the hex side. Got it. Got it. Okay. Advance after combat. If an attacked hex becomes empty as a result of combat, the defending units either retreated or were eliminated, the attacking units may advance 1 or 2 hexes. Okay. Non-mechanized combat units may advance 1 hex. This all sounds so familiar to the Simonage system. Non-mechanized combat units may advance 1 hex. Mechanized combat units may advance 1 or 2 hexes, even if the defender retreated only 1 hex. Headquarters may advance with their stack. Advance after combat is optional. The attacker may advance all, some, or none of his attacking units. Advance after combat is not normal movement. Advancing units do not expend movement points, and enemy zones of control are ignored. Interesting. The first hex of advance must be the attacked hex. There is no limitation as to the second hex of advance, except that units cannot advance across impassable hex sides, into water hexes, or off-map. Mechanized units that participated in the same combat can end their advance in different hexes. Overruns. An advancing combat unit can overrun a lone enemy headquarters by simply entering its hex. Major river hex sides. A mechanized unit that crossed an unbridged major river hex side on its first hex of advance after combat must stop and cannot advance a second hex. A mechanized unit cannot cross an unbridged major river hex side on its second hex of advance after combat. Interesting. I think in Holland 44, I don't think mechanized units can cross major river hex sides like that. But maybe this is like a higher level where you're assuming they have bridging equipment with them. Supply. In the supply phase, the players first check the supply state of their units. Once this is done, all headquarters found to be out of supply must be relocated. Supply determination. Both players simultaneously determine the supply status of all their units. A unit is in supply if it can trace a supply line to a friendly supply source. Supply lines. A supply line is a series of adjacent hexes going from the unit to a friendly supply source. There is no limit to the number of hexes a supply line can pass through. However, it cannot pass through an enemy-occupied hex or an enemy zone of control unless the hex contains any friendly combat units or headquarters. A supply line cannot cross unbridged major river hex sides, impassable hex sides, or pass through water hexes. Got it. Yeah, the way it works in Holland 44 is that there's a, what do they call it, an overland portion. So basically you get a couple of hexes at the beginning from tracing from your unit that is allowed to do stuff like cross rivers, I think. I think they might be allowed to cross major river hex. I'm not sure about that. But then there's another segment that's like stricter, where it has to be along a road. Supply markers. A unit unable to trace a supply line is out of supply and is marked with an out of supply marker. If this unit already has an out of supply marker, it is isolated instead, and the out of supply marker is flipped to its isolated side. If this unit already had an isolated marker, it keeps it and suffers no extra penalties. If a unit marked with an out of supply or isolated marker is able to trace a supply line, the marker is removed. In supply, out of supply, and isolation status are in effect until the next supply phase, when supply status is checked again. Turn 1 supply. At game start, all units on map are in supply. Okay. So I guess here. Supply status effects. Well, what's this example? Advance after combat example. Supply example. Advance after combat. Oh, I already read this earlier, but I didn't. Okay, let's, I guess, look at this now. Advance after combat example. Hex 1 has been vacated as a result of combat. The attacking Soviet 1st Guards Cavalry Corps has the option of advancing into the hex. Okay. Hex 2 has been vacated as a result of combat. The attacking Soviet 1st GM, what's GM? Guards Motorized? Mechanized? Yeah, 1st Guards Mechanized Corps has the option of advancing into the hex across the unbridged hex side, but must then stop. Hex 3 has been vacated as a result of combat. The attacking Soviet 10th Tank and 25th Tank Corps have the option of advancing up to 2 hexes, either as a stack or each on its own. Got it. All right, back to this. Supply. Supply status effects. In supply. In supply units operate normally. Out of supply. Out of supply units have their attack strength halved. Their defense strength and movement allowance are not affected. Isolation. Isolated units have their attack strength, defense strength, and movement allowance halved. This is reminding me of Lee Moves North, where isolation required, I think it was like being more than a certain number of, I think isolation, yeah, I think it was like being more than a certain number of hexes away. So it's like this is very similar to the way this kind of worked in, except in this case it's like how long you're out of supply determines whether you switch between these two statuses. So it's always interesting to think about the similarities and differences between different games in how they handle stuff like this. But anyway, headquarters relocation. Once supply status has been checked for all units, headquarters with out-of-supply markers must be relocated. Remove the markers after relocation. Okay. Reinforcements. Oh, actually, let me see if there's an example here of supply. Here we go, supply example. So, the 298th Division, which is, I'm looking at the numbers at the top here, this one, cannot trace a supply line to a friendly supply source, as hexes 1 and 2 are both in enemy zones of control. The unit is marked with an out-of-supply marker. Got it. A supply line cannot cross impassable hex sides or pass through water hexes. The 15th Luftwaffe Division is marked with an out-of-supply marker. Got it. The Totenkopf Division negates the Soviet zone of control in its hex for the purpose of supply trace. The PADA, what does PADA stand for? Oh, it's this long Italian thing. The PADA Division can thus trace a supply line Pada here to a friendly supply source and is in supply. Got it. Straightforward enough. Okay, continuing on, reinforcements. During the reinforcement segment, both players receive and place their reinforcement units due for this turn. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that this happens afterwards. In Holland 44, the reinforcements happen at the beginning of your player turn. Reinforcement unit placement. The Axis player places all his reinforcements first. Then the Soviet player does the same. Combat units and headquarters receive as reinforcements are placed. Oh, combat units and headquarters received as reinforcements are placed on railroad hexes that can trace a continuous railroad route unblocked by enemy zones of control or enemy units, including headquarters, to a friendly supply source. They can be placed in hexes not within command range of friendly headquarters, but cannot be placed into enemy zones of control. Friendly units do not negate enemy zones of control for the purpose of placement. Got it. Reinforcement units can be placed in an enemy-controlled victory city. In this case, they take control of it. Got it? Note, be careful to block the railroad lines with your units, or the other player will place reinforcements deep behind your lines. Okay, got it. Command chits. The command chits corresponding to any Axis headquarters placed on map as reinforcements, as well as any Manstein command chit due to arrive this turn, are set face down in the Axis inactive command chit pool. The Soviet player receives no command chits during the game. Reinforcements that cannot enter the map on the scheduled turn are considered eliminated. Okay. Wow, okay, that's pretty, yeah, that's punitive, very punitive. German 1st Panzer Army and Soviet 28th Army. The headquarters and combat units of the German 1st Panzer Army and Soviet 28th Army are not placed on railroad hexes during the reinforcement segment when they become available. Turn 1 for the 28th Army, turn 4 for the 1st Panzer Army. Okay, they are instead placed in their respective reinforcement boxes. The 1st Panzer Army command chit is placed down in the Axis inactive command chit pool when the 1st Panzer Army is set in its reinforcement box. Map entry. The headquarters and combat units in a reinforcement box must enter the map during the movement segment when the headquarters is first activated. They do so by moving normally. That is, they enter any hexes adjacent to the box, paying normal movement costs, and go on with their movement. They can use strategic movement if the first hex they enter is a road hex. Once units have left a box, they cannot re-enter it. Okay? When activated, a headquarters in a reinforcement box can activate only the units present in the same box. It cannot activate units outside. Okay? HQ removal. I have to see what this looks like in the actual game. It's a little bit hard to visualize this without seeing the map. Headquarters removal. Headquarters with no friendly combat units within their command range at the end of a reinforcement segment are removed from the game, along with their corresponding command chits. Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian headquarters only consider German units and units of their own nationality as friendly for the purpose of this rule. Headquarters special rules. They have Romanian, okay. Overruns. A headquarters alone in a hex may be overrun by enemy combat units when they move, retreat, or advance after combat. The combat unit simply enters the headquarters hex, and the headquarters is relocated. Note that a headquarters alone in a hex cannot be attacked by enemy combat units during a combat segment. Okay. And I'm saying, I think they're mentioning this because otherwise you could use this to like advance an extra hex or two by attacking a headquarters. Combat losses. Headquarters never suffer step losses and cannot be eliminated as a result of combat. However, a headquarters must be relocated if all the combat units stacked with it at the beginning of the turn of a combat are eliminated as a result of this combat, whether due to step loss, inability to retreat, or retreat into an enemy zone of control. Retreats. A headquarters stacked with combat units at the start of a combat must retreat with them if they are forced to retreat as a result of this combat. Advance after combat. A headquarters stacked with combat units at the start of a combat may advance with them at the attacker's option if they advance after this combat. It can advance 2 hexes if it is stacked with mechanized units, advancing 2 hexes. Unsupplied headquarters. A headquarters with an out-of-supply marker at the end of a supply phase is relocated. Removal. A headquarters and its corresponding command chit is removed from the game if there are no friendly combat units within its command range at the end of a reinforcement segment. Relocation. The headquarters is removed from its current hex and is immediately placed back on the map by its owner and has any out-of-supply marker removed from it. The relocation distance must be the shortest possible while meeting the following requirements. 1. At least 4 hexes away from the hex the headquarters is relocated from. 2. Closer to any friendly supply source. 3. Not in an enemy zone of control. 4. Able to trace a supply line to a friendly supply source. Okay. Note that a combat unit does not have to be within the relocated headquarters command range at the time of relocation, but the headquarters risks removal come the reinforcement segment if the situation does not change. Got it? If the headquarters cannot be relocated, it is received as a reinforcement on the next turn. Okay. Stalingrad Pocket. Until the end of turn 4, Axis and Soviet units cannot use any hex within the Stalingrad Pocket area for any purpose, be it moving, tracing a supply line, using a rail line to place reinforcements, or anything else. The only exception is that command range can be traced through Stalingrad Pocket hexes. From the beginning of turn 5, the Stalingrad Pocket area hexes are normal hexes in every respect. Note, I'll have to see what this looks like in the map because it's hard to visualize what this means, what the effect is. Note, when the Stalingrad Pocket ceases to exist on turn 5, the rail lines open up and the Soviet player can rail reinforcements wherever there are no Axis units or zones of control to prevent it. If the Axis player is not careful, he will find Soviet reinforcements appearing deep behind his lines. Okay. So it sounds like the Stalingrad Pocket is like a representation of the encirclement at Stalingrad. Maybe. Not sure. Okay, victory conditions. Both players may gain and lose victory points during play as follows. City control. 5 victory points for each victory city. This means that when a victory city changes hands, the player taking the city gains 5 victory points, while the player losing it loses 5 victory points. Example. The victory point levels are Axis 26, Soviets 8, when the Soviets capture Rostov. The victory point levels are now Axis 21, Soviets 13. Got it. Enemy combat units eliminated. Each German, not Axis, mechanized unit is worth 3 victory points for the Soviets. Each German, not Axis, non-mechanized unit is worth 1 victory point for the Soviets. Each Soviet mechanized unit is worth 1 victory point for the Axis. Out of supply or isolated units at the end of the game are considered eliminated. Okay? Note, use the control markers to note who controls which victory cities, and keep eliminated enemy units on hand so as to be able to easily calculate VP levels. Note that the Axis player begins with 25 victory points since he controls the 5 victory cities at game start. Sudden death victory. During the sudden death victory segment of any turn, if either player has at least 30 victory points more than his opponent, the game ends with a win for this player. If this never happens, the player who has the most victory points at the end of turn 9 wins. Okay? Play balance. Some will feel a victory lost favors one side or the other. The optional rules below should give a bit of a boost to whichever side is felt at a disadvantage. Players are free to experiment with them as they please. Soviet help. Each eliminated German mechanized unit is worth 5 Soviet victory points instead of 3. Right, okay? Administrative movement. A Soviet unit which neither starts its move in an enemy zone of control nor enters one during its move gains 1 additional movement point to spend. This is cumulative with strategic movement benefits. The 1st Panzer Army arrives as reinforcements on turn 5, so I'm guessing that's delaying one of the German units. Axis help. On the turn they arrive as reinforcement, Manstein chits are received during the command chit selection phase, not reinforcement segment, and so can immediately be selected to be put into the cup. During the command chit selection phase, the Soviet player must select his chits 1 turn in advance. On turn 1, he selects his chits normally for the turn and notes down his selection for turn 2. On turn 2, he uses the selection he noted down and notes down his selection for turn 3, etc. That's an interesting rule. That's a really cool rule. Yeah, that's really interesting. After the initial Soviet special combat segment on turn 1, the Axis player may designate one of the chits he selected during the command chit selection phase as the next chit drawn. After that, the remaining Soviet and Axis chits are put into the cup and play proceeds as usual after the initial split. Interesting. Just on turn 1. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I obviously have to play the game to know more about it and how to, what I should think about it. But one of the big things that I wish these games would do is give optional rules that cancel or do away with major strategic blunders that were done historically. So, like, for example, allowing Paulus, I don't know how to pronounce his name, to withdraw from Stalingrad and not get encircled, stuff like that. I don't know if they let you do that in this game or if you're kind of stuck into that decision, but that's kind of the thing that I've missed from a lot of these games is they feel sometimes like they're a bit on rails, and they don't give you full freedom to explore alternative decisions. But yeah, I'm excited to give this a try. And I just had A Victory Awaits arrive today, so I'm excited to read the rules for that. I imagine they're not very different, and I'm excited to play that one as well. But yeah, that's A Victory Lost.